Do I have to do that again? Welcome to the next episode of Field Service in Focus. And today I've invited Tom Mills from the Field Solutions Group. Tom's got a long background of recruiting in the industry, so we're really going to discuss in more detail the topic of the evolving role of the field worker. So Tom, can you talk to us a bit about your background in the field service industries and the Field Solutions Group and how you get involved with companies?
Yes, of course. So my background, I started around 11 years ago recruiting field engineers, and I've been doing it ever since, really. And the Field Solutions Group, we are a UK leading provider of field service engineers and field sales professionals in the UK and across Europe.
Fantastic. And obviously I've met you several times over the years at different field service events. So obviously in that time, those 11 years, the role of the field worker has changed a huge amount. Can you talk to us a bit about how that's evolved?
Yeah, I think from a field worker's perspective, it's changed from both a technology perspective in terms of what they're doing day to day. It's a very different kind of working pattern and working week. And as well the competency of the person and the individual. I think it's no longer a case that a field engineer is somebody that just goes in, fixes something and leaves. I would say they're more now technical account managers. They've got a bit more of a commercial slant to their role, is what I would say.
Okay, so it matters, I guess, how they're communicating with the customers when they go in, because I guess they're representing the brand of the company that they're working for.
You know, a salesperson will go in and sell the equipment, whatever it might be, but really the person that's in there most and the person that's the touch point for the business is the field engineer. So companies realise this now, and this has really advanced over the last 5 to 10 years. And when they're recruiting engineers, they no longer just look at qualification, they look at competencies, and they really want engineers who are going to go into a customer, build that rapport, understand if there's any opportunities to, you know, strengthen that relationship, understand if there's any
sell
sales.
Additional services.
Well, I mean, we're seeing engineers now with sales commissions, which was never a thing.
So
it's no longer a role where you're just going in fixing something. You're going in and you're a consultant and a representative of your employer and your business.
So Tom, you talked about competencies and how that's changed over the time you've been involved in recruitment in the industry. Can you talk to us a bit more about the competencies and what companies are looking for in terms of skills or should be looking for?
Yeah, sure. Well, we did a bit of research around that, and we spoke to 50 field service managers in different sectors. And we kind of just wanted to bring forward what the competencies were required to be an engineer, and which ones of those were innate and which ones were trainable. What we found was that the key things that we felt were innate, and obviously don't hold this as precedent, but it's just our data and what we've found, is the tenacity is a key one. Self-motivation is a key one. And student mentality, you know, having
what does that mean?
Student mentality. So willingness to learn. You know, having that. You know, some people have the know-it-all mentality, don't they? And some have, I'm always learning and I want to learn, and I have a keen willingness to learn. So that's a key thing for a field engineer, I would say. And I don't believe those are trainable. Obviously, there's lots of other competencies you need to be, you know, highly organised. You must be as a field engineer. You've got to have great communication skills. But those are more trainable. I'd say these are things that are innate.
And you talked there a bit about student mentality. Obviously, that means that they're willing to learn. So if you're bringing in someone who hasn't got the certification but has that student mentality, that willingness to learn, what's typical onboarding time and what does that involve?
Well, from an onboarding perspective, and I think another good point to talk about is from a recruitment perspective, how quickly it needs to be nowadays compared to before. That's another point. But from an onboarding perspective, you know, it depends on the industry. You know, for example, in the commercial catering sector, those engineers have to have had 2, 3, 4 years experience to actually be self-sufficient.
Okay.
So that's a sector where they're massively struggling with that. They're struggling because they can't bring people in as trainees, and it's going to take years for them to actually add value.
Right.
Whereas other sectors, like some IT sectors, some managed print services sectors, it's actually quite a quick process to get somebody up to speed.
Yeah.
So if they've got that student mentality that you're talking about, then are you better sitting on a vacancy for 6 to 12 months to get the perfect candidate?
Yeah.
Or are you better going for that candidate with the
Getting
student
them
mentality?
in and train them up.
And the answer's clear, isn't it, at the end of the day? From a cost perspective as well, people look at immediate costs, but the reality is you've got to look at soft costs as well. And what it costs, what I mean by soft cost is, the cost of not having somebody in that seat, the cost of a customer not receiving a 4-hour SLA. What is the cost of that?
If you're missing SLAs, you can't grow, you're massively impacting your business.
Yeah, exactly. But then the other point was the onboarding point, and this is one of the massive differences that I've seen recruiting field engineers. When I first started doing it, it was a case of a client would give us a vacancy, and we could go out, do some research, speak to candidates, speak to probably 10, 15, 20 candidates for each job, submit the best 5, do a first interview, then they could do the final interview with the next 3, and then they could choose the one they wanted. It was, don't get me wrong, that's nirvana. That's an ideal scenario. Right. But nowadays, due to what the challenges we've discussed, I've had, and only last week, we had one candidate that came through with a really good background. And on day 1, we'd arranged 10 interviews for that candidate. On day 2...
Swap totally.
When do you want to see this candidate? Can they do this afternoon? We'll get them on Teams straight away. And they're all diving in there to get this candidate. And the interviews are being arranged within 24, 48 hours, and offers are going out within days. We've had a candidate on multiple occasions where we've had the initial call with them and we've placed them on the same day. So that's how quickly it's moving nowadays. So I'm having this conversation with companies all the time that wanted a 2-3 stage processes, that are dragging out recruitment processes for weeks, months on end even, and they're missing out on good quality talent because of their recruitment process. So I'm not saying cut corners. You need to have your due diligence, and you need to ensure that you're recruiting good people with good backgrounds and assessing them accordingly. But you have to act fast. You have to find that balance of acting on, striking while the fire's hot, and getting onto these candidates as soon as they are available, because your competitors are, if you're not. So from an onboarding perspective, it's changed rapidly.
What's your typical recruitment process at the Field Solutions Group, and what do you look for? What are the competencies you look for when you're recruiting field workers?
Well, that is a broad question, because every customer has a different requirement, and whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's a reseller, we could have 10 companies that have the same flavour of engineer and look for the same skill sets. But each company will recruit a different type of engineer. And what I mean by that is, the competency of each engineer. Each business has a different expectation of what they expect of their engineers. So
is that about their brand then, or what they believe is the customer experience they want to offer?
Yeah, I think if you, and you'll have seen this in other industries, when you're buying a product from a company, you may be able to get that same product from different businesses, but the service may differ. Depending on,
and that's how they're really differentiating is on that service.
And each business has its own core values. Each business has its own way of working, and it's our job really as a recruitment specialist to match that. And this is what I was talking about with the competencies of engineers. It's not enough now for us to just go out and find somebody with the relevant certification. We need to find a match for the business from a value, from a culture, and from a general working ethic perspective. If that makes sense.
And you talked about the competency, more the certification, the technical competencies. Have you seen that change? Do people still have the same technical certification that they did 11 years ago?
Well, no would be the answer, because the technology has come on leaps and bounds, and it's been happening for well over a decade now. So the role of a field engineer has changed due to the technology, and we can come on to that. But with regards to the skill sets that people have, what we're seeing now is in businesses, the equipment that they've got does more things.
Okay.
It talks.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to look at IT, the printer talks to the IT, the
Yeah.
IT talks to the telco,
Yeah.
and as such, engineers have had to become more rounded. They've had to adapt their skill sets and learn new things, and some are more reluctant to do that than others.
I can imagine.
As you can imagine, but yeah, as a rule of thumb, it's been a real good thing for the industry, because engineers like versatility. As a rule of thumb, they like to learn new things. They don't like to be mundane, and so from a technology perspective, it's been really positive, I would say.
So do you find the type of, the demographic is changing then that's being recruited into the industry?
Well, we're doing a lot of projects now with, certainly with the manufacturers, around bringing new talent into the industry.
Yeah.
It's been a big problem, if we're being honest, with regards to field engineering, because whichever way we look at it, it is an ageing workforce. So to put some meat on the bones there, the last couple of years, over 75% of the people we have placed in field engineering have been over 55.
Wow.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because some of the best engineers I've worked with have been 60 plus.
Yeah.
And there is always a need for time-served engineers and people in businesses who have walked the walk and talked the talk. But it's not to shy away from the fact that there is a lack of pipeline.
Yeah.
There is a lack of younger, talent coming through, and there's many reasons for that. I think some of it's the perception of what a field engineer is, and some of it is just that people don't see it as a very attractive role for whatever reason. But when you delve deeper, there are a lot of positives in being a field engineer, and this is what we're talking to people about. And when we've put new people into the industry, it's been a real positive thing, and the feedback from the candidates as well as the clients has been fantastic.
Yeah. So what are you doing as a company to help kind of get that young talent in? What kind of activities do you get involved in?
So we work a lot with different universities and colleges in getting that message out there, and speaking to graduates and college leavers that have done, say, electromechanical or IT disciplines, and want to pursue that career, because the harsh reality is people that do those courses don't necessarily think about being a field engineer. They tend to think about being, an aerospace engineer.
Because it sounds more appealing.
It sounds
and their perception of a field engineer is that middle-aged man, you know what I mean?
Hard hat, spanner in your hand, and that's really what it is. But if you look deeper into it, a field engineer field engineers keep this country ticking. If like I said to you earlier, in a hospital, a doctor can't do his job unless the equipment works, which is maintained by the field engineer. You can't keep your kids warm at Christmas unless the heating works in your house. Again, a field engineer. You can't run a corporation or a successful business without IT. Again, a field engineer. So this is the message that we need to be pushing into the younger.
But I suppose it's them having that role models. If their perception is that it's that 55-year-old man, you know what I mean, and they want something different. They want a job that's sexier. They've got the tech. Actually, that role has changed. How do we make sure those guys know? And maybe we're not clever enough with social media or the types of videos and things we're getting out there, isn't it?
It's storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about getting that message out there to people at a young age, but also championing role models, championing people who have gone through that process and have been a success and made a success of their career in field engineering. We've just got to get that out there more. So hopefully people like yourself can help with that.
And I'm thinking as well, like, how many women have you placed in roles? And how women heavy is the role of the field engineer?
So from what we're seeing in the STEM industries, you're getting a representation from women of around 15 to 20%. But when you look at field engineering per se, certainly in our business and other businesses I speak to, it's less than 1%.
Wow, it's a massive dropout.
And when you consider the candidate shortage in field engineering and what we're seeing and looking at the UK Labour report and from our customers, the vacancies are increasing more than ever. There is a huge increase of vacancies, and some vacancies being live for 6 to 12 months. Wow. Versus the biggest decrease we've ever seen of candidate availability for field engineers. Yeah. So if we can just get that 1%, I mean, that's a huge market that we're not tapping into, the female market, the women in engineering. So if we can get that 1% to 2, 3, 4, 5 and beyond, that's just going to increase the candidate pool rapidly. And, you know, we need to be getting that message out there.
And getting those role models out there, those women who are doing a great role.
And they're there, they are there. They are there, you know. So
we just need to get them visible.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
Definitely.
Just, you talked there about the fact that those jobs are being advertised for 6 to 12 months.
Yep.
Obviously, that's having a massive impact on companies. Yep. You know, it's their ability to grow, is it? What kind of impact does it have on them?
It absolutely stunts their growth as a business. Yeah. You know, you can't, and ultimately you're losing customers. So it's costing you a lot of money. So, you know, our business, we always try to fill our vacancies within weeks and quicker if we can. But there are times where we can't do that because the candidate pool is just not there, or maybe the customer's not offering the right remuneration, or whatever the challenge is. So what we try and do with our clients and with all field engineering businesses is say, look, this is the ideal, this is what you want.
Sure.
But if we can't get that, what's B, C, what's the next kind of steps we can look into? Yeah. But it's those companies that are less agile that are falling behind, if I'm honest with you. So those that are like, it needs to be this person with this skill set and this salary, it's on this salary, and that's that. Yeah. Those are the companies that are sitting, you know, 6, 12 months on vacancies, and unfortunately sometimes they can't see the impact that's having on their business until it's too late. Yeah, and do you think that's just history, that the job spec itself has had, they need to have these certifications, they need to have these technical skills? Because as you said, with technology, actually a lot of times they don't need those technical skills because they can learn that much quicker because technology is enabled with a lot of the intelligence within it. Well, absolutely, and it's you know, the way technology has advanced, the role of a field engineer has changed as well completely. So when I first started doing this role, we had the engineer went out and did 5 to 10 calls a day, typically. Right. Out in their van or their car, and then went home, and that was their typical working day. Whereas now it's very different. A lot of calls now can be dealt with without somebody in the customer. Okay, they can do it by remote assistance or a phone call. Yeah, remote monitoring software and the advancement in technology. You know, this equipment's talking to the office and talking to everyone. So a field engineer now, for me, typically in the industries that we see, they don't necessarily need to be doing that. They might do more calls per day, but actually physically going to a customer less. Yeah. So it's making engineers more productive. Because they're not having to travel there, they're not getting... Precisely, but we still see companies that don't invest in this technology and do things the old school way. And, you know, it's the if it isn't broke, don't fix it mentality, and that's the kind of the way they have it. But what they need to understand is, if an engineer is being offered 2 jobs and the one company has all the technology to enable them to do the role that we've just discussed, versus the company that do it the old school way and they're travelling around, leaving at 5 in the morning, getting home at 7 at night, which one's the engineer going to go for? And also, if the engineer's in that business, how long is he going to be there, or she? Yeah. How long are they going to be there? Yeah. So, you know, it's a case of, if businesses aren't investing in that technology from a recruitment viewpoint, they're going to struggle to attract, retain, and develop. So you mentioned retention there, and obviously we've talked a lot about recruitment, but retention's really important, especially for these manufacturers that have, you know, as you said, have put engineers through courses and certification. Yeah. So what are companies really doing to stop losing this talent? You know, there are many things you can do to retain an engineer. And we did a lot of research around, you know, retention and engineers, and we spoke to I sound like Les Dennis when I say this, we spoke to 200 field engineers. And the response was, you know, the key things for them are a good working environment, training and progression in your role. The main factor, of course, you'd guess, would be money, and it is. You've got to you've got to be above market salary or at least in line with market salary to retain your staff, because with the cost of living crisis and bills going up, you know, you can have the best working environment in the world, but the harsh reality of it is if you have an underpaid engineer with regards to what the market is paying, you're subject to losing them. You really are. So you've got to have your finger on the pulse as a field service manager. That's what I would say. You've got to be, you know, we do a lot of salary surveys for our clients, and you need to be taking that on board.
You mentioned career progression as being one of those things that can help retain engineers.
Absolutely.
So what kind of careers can a field service engineer progress to, and how do you see them developing through?
Yeah, well, I think, again, that's dependent on industry. So I could talk about each individual sector that we work in and the typical progression routes there. But if I had to sort of put it all into one, you know, you're coming in as a field engineer, then typically you'll progress into being maybe more of a technical specialist. Then you may even go into being a technical supervisor, a regional service manager, a service director. But I've also seen engineers going into project management and going into more what you call white collar work, where they're more, you know, and our business, we've recently seen engineers actually going into sales and making that move. Because
that's interesting,
which is quite an interesting one, because again, from a competency perspective, a salesperson's a very different person per se to an engineer, but actually some engineers, they've got the technical knowledge and they've got the gift of the gab, as they say, and that's a very smooth transition.
So finally, Tom, what advice would you give to someone who's considering a role in field service?
I would say do your research firstly. There are lots of different industries that field service operate in, and refrigeration is very different to IT, is very different to gas, is very different to medical. So you need to kind of find your lane, and you can speak to various people in those industries to understand, you know, the challenges, the opportunities, and all sorts. And I would recommend doing your research to find which one best suits you as a person. But I would say, you know, go for it. I would say it's a very, very rewarding career. You know, there is excellent earning potentials. You will get to meet people from all walks of life in all environments, and this is people from, you know, C-level right the way down to entry level, and you will, you know, get exposure to all forms of business. You will progress as a person, and each day will be different. And
I guess you're dealing with different types of customers every day in different scenarios.
If you're a people person and you're interested in technology, then a field engineer is a great route for you, I would say.
Fantastic. It's been so great talking to you today, Tom. Thanks for
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
All your words of wisdom. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.